Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever found yourself making the same kinds of misjudgments? Falling for the same mental traps, even when deep down you feel like you should know better?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common experience, isn't it?
It is. It's almost like our brains are sort of hardwired for these particular slip-ups.
Mm.
So today, we're embarking on, well, a fascinating journey into something the experts call cognitive errors.
Right. These systematic deviations from pure logic. That's the key phrase.
Exactly. And these aren't just, random brain glitches or moments of being absent-minded.
Not at all.
No, these are routine, predictable mistakes, persistent barriers to rational thought that we just keep stumbling over.
Time and again. It's like repeating patterns, not just in our own lives, but you see them through generations, across centuries even.
Precisely. So our mission today is to explore these predictable errors, try to understand where they come from, their underlying mechanisms.
And really uncover why we're so susceptible, even, the smartest people among us.
Yeah, and this deep dive, it isn't about blaming anyone for, flawed thinking.
No, not at all. It's about gaining clarity.
Right, equipping you, the listener, with insights and hopefully some tangible tools to maybe navigate your world a bit more effectively.
I think what's truly compelling about this whole topic isn't just that these errors exist, but how pervasive they are.
Mhm.
And like you said, their predictable nature.
That predictability is key.
It really is. Our source material, it describes them vividly. It says they pile up in one specific predictable corner, so like dirty laundry, while, the other corner stays relatively clean. It's not just chaos.
Systematic bias. Yeah.
A systematic bias in our mental architecture.
Yeah.
So throughout our conversation today, we'll dive into specific examples, stuff ranging from, seemingly small personal decisions all the way up to big, far-reaching global events.
Just to show how these mental shortcuts impact us.
Exactly. And the knowledge we're sharing, it's not just one researcher's idea. It's built on decades of rigorous research from brilliant minds. Psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience.
It's like looking under the hood.
Yeah, exploring the often hidden operating system of our own minds.
Okay, so let's start with how our perception itself can play tricks on us. It's almost like our minds come with these default glasses, right? And they subtly distort what we see, often completely without us realizing it.
Yes, subconsciously.
And one of the most fundamental ones is survivorship bias.
Ah, yes. Classic.
This is that persistent tendency we have to systematically overestimate our chances of succeeding. And why? Well, simply because triumph, success, it's just made so much more visible than failure.
It really is. And it's everywhere once you start looking for it. Think about that classic anecdote of Rick. Rick looks at successful people. Maybe it's top entrepreneur, a famous artist, a winning athlete.
Right, the ones who made it.
Exactly. And he concludes, well, their path to success must have been pretty straightforward or, easy to copy.
If they did it, I can do it.
Precisely. But what Rick completely overlooks are the countless, literally countless individuals who started on similar journeys, worked just as hard, but failed. They didn't reach that peak.
And their stories don't get told.
Their struggles are invisible. The graveyard of failures is way, way larger than the gallery of successes.
That's a good way to put it. Think about a popular author. Their book hits the bestseller list. You hear about them, see their interviews, and you might think, wow, writing looks like a pretty good gig.
It seems achievable.
But for every one of those famous authors, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of writers whose books never sold a copy.
Yeah.
Or whose manuscripts are just gathering dust somewhere. Or they couldn't even get a publisher.
Or they just gave up entirely.
Exactly. And the media, it's not really focused on documenting the vast landscape of the unsuccessful, is it?
No, its nature is to chase the achievement narratives.
So as observers, we get this disproportionate exposure to the successes, and it creates this illusion, this feeling that triumph is widespread when, well, the reality is very different.
And that applies everywhere. Photography, startups, even getting a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
This whole phenomenon, survivorship bias, it's really fundamental to understanding why, say, advertising campaigns work so well, or why some institutions just seem to have this outsized prestige.
Like the swimmer's body illusion you mentioned from the source.
Exactly. People admire Harvard, right?
Yeah.
They see lots of successful people who are Harvard alumni.
So they think, Harvard must be an amazing teaching institution. It turns average students into brilliant ones.
But the source suggests something, well, more nuanced. It uses St. Gallen University in Switzerland as an example. An alumnus apparently said his lessons were, quote, mediocre.
Mediocre, okay.
Yet, a remarkable number of its graduates achieve major success.
So what's the catch?
The crucial insight is that both Harvard and St. Gallen probably get their high rates of successful alumni not mainly through teaching, but through their incredibly tough selection process.
Ah, so it's who they let in, not just what they teach.
Precisely. They recruit the brightest, the most motivated students from the get-go. It ensures a high-quality input rather than necessarily having some uniquely transformative output.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means you need to be really careful when you hear success stories that sound a bit too perfect, a bit too easy. Especially when someone's encouraging you to chase something, whether it's, getting ripped like a pro athlete, hitting a certain income level, or even finding constant happiness.
Be wary.
You might be falling for that swimmer's body illusion. Before you jump into something new, take a really critical look at the factors underneath. Don't just admire the success you see.
Actively look for the failures.
Yes. Ask yourself, okay, what percentage of people trying this don't make it? What are the common problems that nobody talks about?
That active search for the counter-evidence, for those hidden cemeteries of projects or people who didn't make it, that's your best defense against this illusion of easy success.
It's about remembering correlation isn't causation.
Exactly. The Harvard grads are successful, maybe not because Harvard made them successful, but maybe because Harvard picked people who are already likely to succeed.
Right.
And to really avoid the bias, you have to, as the source says, do the digging yourself. Look for those invisible failures. Get the whole picture.
Okay, now let's switch gears to what some call the mother of all misconceptions.
Yes.
This one's big.
Confirmation bias. This is our, kind of insidious tendency to interpret any new information so it fits perfectly with what we already believe.
Our existing theories, our convictions.
Right. And at the same time, we filter out or ignore or just dismiss anything that contradicts them.
Aldous Huxley nailed it. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored.
But boy, are we good at ignoring them. Warren Buffett said something similar, didn't he? He did. He said, what the human being is best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact. We protect our beliefs.
It's so strong because fundamentally our brains want to create these coherent stories, right?
Exactly. Neat narratives.
Yeah.
And disconfirming evidence. That shatters the story.
It's uncomfortable.
It's cognitively taxing, yeah. It takes effort to update beliefs we've held for a long time.
And the danger is becoming, totally blind to that disconfirming evidence.
Which just leads to this cycle of poor decisions that reinforce themselves.
Like the executive team example. They commit to a new strategy, and then they grab onto any tiny data point that seems to confirm they were right. See? Proof.
While completely brushing off the warning signs. Sales dip. Negative feedback.
Oh, that's just an exception. An outlier. A special case.
Exactly. And they're not usually lying, not consciously anyway. They're just filtering reality through that pre-existing lens, functionally blind to anything that challenges their conviction.
Which is why diversity of thought on a team is so critical.
Absolutely. Not just background, but thinking styles.
So what can you, the listener, do to fight this? It's tough.
It is. But we can learn from people like Charles Darwin.
Right. He actively fought his own confirmation bias. How?
He developed this rigorous habit. Anytime he made an observation that contradicted his theories, he made a special note of it, gave it extra attention.
He knew the brain naturally forgets that stuff.
Exactly. He understood the brain actively forgets disconfirming evidence pretty quickly. The more sure he felt about a theory, the harder he looked for contradictions. He knew it was his best defense against fooling himself.
So for you listening, when you're forming an opinion or evaluating something, especially if you feel really strongly about it, actively ask yourself, okay, what evidence would actually disprove what I believe right now?
And listen for that word, exception.
Yeah.
When you hear someone say, oh, that's just an exception, your ears should perk up. That's often a sign that confirmation bias is trying to shield a cherished belief from some inconvenient facts.
It's not just about what you look for.
It's about what you allow yourself to actually see. You need that intellectual humility.
Being okay with being wrong sometimes.
Exactly. Challenging your own assumptions. It takes conscious effort.
Okay, let's shift focus again. Let's look at the contrast effect.
This one's interesting.
It's how our perception of something gets heavily influenced when we compare it to something else. Usually something quite different or something set up as a benchmark.
Like the Sid and Harry story from Cialdini.
Right. The two brothers with the clothing store back in the 30s. Sid's the salesman, Harry's the tailor.
Sid pretends to be hard of hearing.
A customer likes a suit. Sid asks Harry the price. Harry shouts out this crazy high price, like $42, which was a lot then.
Then Sid mishears it, tells the customer he says $22.
And the customer thinks they're getting an amazing deal on a $42 suit.
So they snap it up, even though $22 might still have been pretty expensive.
The $42 anchor just made the $22 seem like a steal.
And that simple trick, that manipulation, it's baked into so much modern marketing.
You see it everywhere.
Yeah, those discount businesses. A product was $100, now only $70. It feels like a much better deal than a similar product that just always costs $70.
Even though it's the exact same price?
The original $100 is the anchor. It shifts your perception of value subtly. Marketers are masters at this.
And it happens in more abstract ways too, right? Like with inflation.
Absolutely. We often don't really feel our money losing value day to day because it's gradual. If inflation hit like a sudden huge tax boom, 30% of your savings gone overnight, people would riot.
Yeah, there'd be outrage.
But because it's slow, the contrast isn't as jarring. So it kind of slides by or doesn't feel as painful.
So if you've ever felt like you got an amazing deal, but later on you thought, maybe it wasn't that special.
You probably felt the contrast effect.
That huge discount might just be the normal price, but your brain got anchored higher.
The key is always to question the reference point. Ask yourself, what am I comparing this to? Is that comparison fair, relevant?
Okay, moving on. Let's look at availability bias.
Right. This is about how easily things come to mind.
Yeah, we build our mental map of risks based on how easily examples pop into our heads, especially vivid or dramatic examples.
So we end up systematically overestimating the chance of, say, a plane crash or a car accident or being murdered. Sensational stuff.
Because those stories stick. They're memorable.
Exactly. And we underestimate the risk of less dramatic, but statistically much more common things.
Like dying from diabetes or stomach cancer or heart disease.
News reports about bomb attacks make them feel really probable.
Well, something widespread like depression might seem less common than it is just because it's not constantly in the headlines in a dramatic way.
Our brains, as the source puts it, they think dramatically, not quantitatively.
The media definitely plays a big role here, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Sensational events get reported. That's news.
And that reporting makes those events highly available in our minds.
Which, as Charlie Munger pointed out, leads us down a tricky path. He said something like,
People focus on information they can count easily.
yeah, people have some information they can count well, and they have other information much harder to count. So they make the decision based only on what they can count well.
We ignore the harder to count stuff, even if it's critical.
Because it's not easily available in our memory.
Yeah.
Even if it's statistically way more important.
So our perception of risk gets totally distorted.
Leading to bad decisions about what to actually worry about, what to invest in, what needs our focus.
So what does this mean for you listening? It means recognizing your mind naturally gravitates towards the dramatic, the recent, the easily recalled. And that can lead you to fundamentally misjudge risk in your daily life, your finances, your career.
You might be overly scared of something unlikely.
While being way too relaxed about a much more calm threat that just isn't as flashy.
The counter is to challenge that gut reaction. Go find the actual stats, the base rates.
Don't just rely on anecdotes or news headlines. See the world to how we act in it. Our minds, trying to save energy, take shortcuts with decisions, and these shortcuts can lead us astray.
Definitely. Starting with a really common one.
Yeah.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Ah, yes. This is that irrational pull to keep going with something, investing time, money, energy, even love.
Simply because you've already put so much into it.
Even when it's clearly a lost cause or it's just not working anymore.
The irrationality is what's so striking. It pops up everywhere. The source gives that business example. An ad manager fighting to keep a campaign going that's clearly failing.
And the justification is?
But we've invested so much money in it already. If we stop now, it'll all have been for nothing.
Classic sunk cost thinking. The money's gone.
It's gone. It's a sunk cost. The rational decision should only be about the future potential. Doesn't make sense going forward, not about what you already spent.
It's such a powerful trap. And it's not just money, right?
Oh, not at all. The source mentions a friend stuck in a really bad relationship. Lots of problems. Infidelity.
And when asked why he stayed,
he said, I've invested so much energy, it would be wrong to throw it all away.
The emotional investment, the time, the effort that becomes the sunk cost.
Exactly. It overrides the clear evidence that the situation is harmful.
And investors do this all the time with losing stocks.
Constantly. Holding on, not because they believe in the company's future, but because the price they paid, the acquisition price was so high, they just want to get back to even.
Which is totally irrational from a future perspective.
Completely. And ironically, the more a share loses, the stronger the emotional pull to keep holding it often becomes.
It's dangerous because the deeper you're invested, the harder it is to cut your losses.
Even when it's staring you in the face that it's a lost cause.
What's fascinating, though, is that a purely rational decision maker wouldn't even consider past investments.
Right. The money's spent, the time's gone, can't get it back.
Only future costs and benefits should matter.
But our psychology just makes it incredibly hard to detach from those sunk costs.
So how do you fight it?
You have to cultivate that dispassionate view of the future. When facing a decision like this, consciously ask yourself, okay, ignoring everything I've already put in, if I were starting from scratch today, would I still make this investment? Would I still choose this path?
That reframing helps focus purely on what makes sense going forward. Okay, next up, a really weird relationship with probability.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It shows up as neglect of probability and also zero-risk bias.
Let's start with neglect of probability. This means we tend to react mostly to the magnitude of an event, how big or bad it seems.
But not really to its actual likelihood, how probable it is.
There was that striking experiment back in '72 with electric shocks.
Right. People expecting a small shock showed pretty much the same anxiety level, whether the risk was 50% or 100%.
Wow, really? 50% versus guaranteed, no difference.
Barely any difference in reported anxiety. And even when they dropped the probability way down to just 5%, stress levels didn't really decrease much.
So the probability didn't matter as much as the idea of the shock.
Exactly. Their anxiety only shot up when the strength of the potential shock was increased.
That really shows we don't have an intuitive feel for how probability actually works.
Not really, which leads right into the zero-risk bias.
This is the desire to eliminate a risk entirely, right? Even a small one.
Yes, even if eliminating that small risk means we ignore a chance to make a much bigger reduction in overall risk elsewhere.
How does this play out in the real world?
Well, connected to public policy or marketing, it gets exploited a lot. Imagine a choice for water treatment. Method A cuts the risk of dying from bad water from 5% down to 2%. It's a 3% absolute reduction. Saves more lives overall.
Okay.
Method B cuts the risk from 1% down to 0%. Only a 1% absolute reduction.
But that gets you to zero.
Exactly. And despite Method A being objectively better in terms of lives saved, most people intuitively choose Method B.
Because zero risk feels psychologically comforting, even if it's irrational.
Precisely. Legislators often fall for this too. They'll ban some specific low-risk thing entirely, like a certain food additive.
Because getting to 0% risk on that one thing sounds good politically. It resonates.
Even if it distracts from tackling much bigger risks that are still out there causing more harm overall.
We just don't grasp risk intuitively, especially when emotions get involved.
Like with radioactivity fears,
Yeah.
people often perceive a 99% contamination risk and a 1% risk almost equally fearfully.
The emotion overrides the numbers.
The emotional response swamps the statistical reality.
So for you listening, what's the takeaway?
Be incredibly wary of anything promising zero risk. It's usually a red herring.
Don't fixate on wiping out one tiny risk. Ask, what's the overall impact here on all the risks?
And remember, our brains react to the drama, not always the data. You often have to consciously override that gut feeling with the actual numbers.
All right, let's talk about the scarcity error.
The power of hard to get.
Exactly, the basic idea. Rare is valuable. When something is scarce, limited, or we feel like our options are being taken away.
We automatically see it as more attractive, often completely separate from its actual quality or usefulness.
Remember Gmail back in 2005 when it first launched?
Oh, yeah, invitation only.
Right. That restriction created this instant frenzy. People were desperate for an invite.
Myself included.
Me too. Not necessarily because we needed another email or because Gmail was light years ahead right then.
But simply because it was exclusive. Not everyone could have it. That made it desirable.
That feeling of scarcity.
And what's really fascinating is how ancient this is. It's deep in our psychology.
The Romans had a saying, right?
They did. Rara sunt cara. Rare is valuable. Our brains are just wired that way.
Probably from evolution.
Likely. Back in hunter-gatherer times, real scarcity often did mean higher value. Maybe better food, a safer location, a critical resource, survival stuff.
But today, that wiring gets exploited.
Constantly. Like the real estate agent telling a hesitant buyer, Oh, there's a doctor from London, very interested, flying in next week.
Creates that fake urgency, fear of missing out.
Exactly. And objectively, whether someone else wants the house should have zero bearing on your decision. But it works. It pushes our buttons.
There was that psychology experiment with posters, too.
Right. Students rated 10 posters. Then they were told the third highest rated one wasn't available anymore.
And suddenly,
When asked to re-rate them, many students rank the unavailable poster as the most beautiful.
just because they couldn't have it.
That's called reactance. When an option is taken away, we suddenly want it more. Like defiance.
It connects to the Romeo and Juliet effect, too. Forbidden love.
Knows no bounds. And think about the drinking age example. U.S. versus Europe.
Right. 21 in the U.S., often seen as forbidden fruit, leading to sometimes desperate teenage drinking.
Whereas in many European countries, 18 is the norm, less stigma, and you often don't see that same level of rebellious consumption.
So, have you listening ever felt that pull? Wanting something more just because it was limited edition or suddenly hard to find?
Even if you didn't care about it before.
It's a powerful bias.
To fight it, you have to pause. Ask yourself, okay, do I actually value this thing for what it is? Or am I just reacting because it's being presented as scarce or exclusive?
Disconnect the scarcity from the actual worth. Okay, let's tackle the anchor effect.
This is about how we latch on to initial information.
Yeah, we use an initial piece of info, the anchor, as a mental starting point when we have to estimate something uncertain, even if that anchor is totally irrelevant, and it skews our judgment.
The classic experiment with the wine bottles and social security numbers is amazing.
Tell us about that one.
A professor had students write down the last 2 digits of their social security number first. Then they bid on a bottle of wine. And the result? Students whose numbers ended high, say in the 90s, bid almost twice as much as students whose numbers ended low, like in the 10s.
That's crazy. Their social security number, completely arbitrary, anchored their bid.
It's incredible how sticky these anchors are, even when you know they're random.
There was another one with a wheel of fortune.
Yep. Rigged to land on either a high number, like 65, or a low one, like 10. Then people estimated the number of UN member states.
And guess what?
High spins led to high estimates, low spins to low estimates. It even worked for historical dates. People with higher phone number endings estimated Attila the Hun was defeated later.
So the more uncertain the actual value of something is, like real estate or stocks or art,
The more susceptible we are, even experts, to these anchors.
which raises that critical question, when you see a price or a number, especially early on in a negotiation.
Ask yourself, what's this being compared to? Is that comparison actually relevant to the real value? Or is it just an anchor trying to shift my perception?
Challenge that first number. It's a powerful tool used against you.
So for you listening, be aware of this. Things like recommended retail price,
Or the first price a salesperson throws out.
or even a teacher knowing past grades before marking new work.
Yeah.
These can all act as subtle anchors.
They set a starting point, and your brain adjusts from there, often without you realizing the start point was picked strategically or was just random.
Try to form your own independent estimate before you see any external anchors. That's a good defense.
Okay, last one in this segment. The paradox of choice. This seems counterintuitive.
It does. We think more choice is always better.
But this idea says, no, actually, too much choice can destroy your quality of life. It leads to paralysis and dissatisfaction.
The famous jelly experiment in the supermarket illustrates this perfectly.
Right. One stand had 24 types of jelly. Another had only 6.
And the stand with only 6 varieties sold 10 times more jelly.
10 times. Why?
Because with 24 choices, people got overwhelmed. They experienced inner paralysis.
Too hard to decide.
Exactly. So they often just gave up and got nothing.
And this paradox is so relevant today, isn't it?
Absolutely. In our complex, consumer-driven world, it hits us constantly. It shows up in 2 main ways.
Yeah.
First, that paralysis you mentioned. Too many options for smartphones, streaming services, restaurants. The cognitive load is huge, so you just quit.
Or you just pick randomly.
Or that. But the second way is maybe worse. The discontent after you choose.
Because how can you be sure you pick the right one out of hundreds?
You can't. So there's more room for regret, for second-guessing, leads to dissatisfaction, not the happiness we expect from infinite choice.
You see it with dating apps, investment choices, everywhere.
We're constantly bombarded, and our brains just struggle to cope. Leads to unhappiness, not fulfillment.
So have you ever felt totally overwhelmed trying to pick something online? Scrolling endlessly for a laptop or a vacation, maybe ended up buying nothing or feeling that buyer's remorse? That's the paradox.
So what's the solution the source suggests?
It's surprisingly simple. Think carefully about what you really want before you even look at the options.
Write down your essential criteria. Be specific.
And crucially, stick to them. Don't get distracted by all the other shiny objects.
And maybe the most liberating part, accept that you can never make a perfect decision with infinite choice.
Aim for good enough, not perfection.
In this age of endless options, good enough is often the most rational and honestly the most satisfying approach.
Okay, let's move into our third segment. Beyond just perception and individual decisions, our very human need to connect, to belong, and frankly, to see ourselves in a good light, that creates another set of traps.
Right. The social and self-biases. Let's start with self-serving bias.
This is our powerful tendency to credit success to ourselves, our smarts, our hard work, our talent.
But blame failures on external stuff.
Yeah.
Bad luck, the economy, other people.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this bias is practically baked into us. It protects our ego.
You see it constantly in the business world. Check out any CEO's annual report.
Good year.
Oh, it's all about their visionary leadership, their brilliant strategy, their indispensable contribution.
Bad year.
Suddenly, it's uncontrollable external forces. Global recession, supply chain chaos, tough market conditions.
Always something else.
Always. Same in sports. Coach gets praised for the win, but points to bad refs or bad luck after a loss. Even if it's just that the other team was better.
It's just fundamental to protecting our self-image.
It is. And it's easy to spot in others, right?
Oh, yeah. But how often do you listening notice that subtle shift in your own explanations? Project goes well. Yeah, I planned that perfectly. Project fails. Well, the team didn't pull their weight or the deadline was impossible.
Recognizing it in ourselves is the hard part, but it's the first step to being more objective.
Okay, next. Contagion bias. This one's interesting.
It's about that emotional connection we feel to things, often irrationally.
Yeah, our inability to ignore the feeling we get from items that have touched something good or bad, it bypasses logic.
The source uses that historical example from the Middle Ages. Bishops waving holy relics around.
Bits of bone, rags supposedly touched by saints.
Waving them at warring nobles to get them to agree to a truce. The peace and truce of God.
And these tough warriors were awed by these objects.
Apparently, they had this reverence, almost superstitious, believing the saint's goodness could transfer through the object.
What's wild is how that kind of thinking persists today, even if we think we're enlightened.
Totally. The source asks, would you wear a freshly washed sweater that Hitler once wore?
Oof, no way.
Most people have that instant recoil. Intellectually, you know it's clean, no Hitler molecules left.
But it just feels wrong, viscerally.
Exactly. It's more than just worrying what others think. Even alone, the thought is repulsive.
It shows that subconscious aversion to things linked with evil, even without a rational reason.
Like the dinner guest spitting out wine from Saddam Hussein's glass. A powerful, irrational reaction to a tainted object.
It really highlights how emotional our reactions to objects and their histories can be, even if we see ourselves as rational.
So, for you listening, just recognize that even if you pride yourself on logic, you probably have some of these deep-seated, almost magical connections.
Good or bad associations with things.
And they can subtly sway your feelings, your preferences, even your decisions. Being aware helps you question those gut reactions.
Now let's turn to motivation crowding. This is a really important one.
It challenges that simple idea that money always motivates.
Right. It says that sometimes offering money can actually do the opposite. It can demotivate.
How? By changing a relationship from one based on goodwill or intrinsic desire
into a purely transactional, monetary one.
The source gives the example of helping a friend move. Classic favor.
Yeah, you do it because they're your friend.
But if afterwards the friend offers you money for helping,
it feels weird. It kind of undermines the gesture.
Exactly. It can taint the friendship, changes it from a freely given favor to a paid job. It crowds out the intrinsic motivation, the friendship motivation.
And this has big implications, doesn't it?
Huge. It raises that important question for managers, parents, policymakers, anyone trying to influence behavior. When you take an intrinsic motivation like community spirit, wanting to help, duty, passion for the work,
and you replace it with an extrinsic one, especially money.
that original, often more powerful drive can just get pushed aside or crowded out.
Like the Swiss nuclear waste example.
Perfect illustration. Villagers were asked if they'd accept a repository. Then they were offered $5,000 compensation.
And acceptance went down.
Dramatically.
Oh,
From
shit.
over 50% down to about 25%.
Why?
because the money felt like a bribe. It cheapened their sense of civic duty and community spirit. They were no longer deciding based on community good, but on personal financial gain, which felt wrong.
Wow. And the nursery late fees?
Same idea. Introducing fees didn't stop parents being late, it just legitimized it.
Turned it into a paid service instead of a social no-no.
Remove the social obligation, replaced it with cash. Lateness actually increased in some cases.
So think about businesses. A charity where people are driven by the mission.
You introduce bonuses for getting donations.
And suddenly, people might only focus on that. Neglect teamwork, admin, other important stuff.
Because only donations bring the bonus.
Yeah.
It can kill creativity, collaboration, the original spirit.
So have you ever seen a reward system backfire like that? Demotivate people or just change things in a bad way?
It's a reminder that motivation is complex. It's not just about dangling carrots.
You have to think about what kind of motivation you want.
Exactly. For creative, collaborative, passion-driven work, focus on intrinsic stuff. Purpose, mastery, autonomy. Save the cash incentives for purely transactional tasks.
Okay, let's look at the false consensus effect.
This is where we think everyone agrees with us.
Yeah, we overestimate how much other people think, feel, and act just like we do. We assume our views are the common ones, the majority view.
That Stanford experiment with the sandwich board is a great example.
Eat at Joe's.
Right. Students were asked if they'd walk around campus wearing this sign.
Yeah.
Those who agreed thought most other students would also agree, about 62%.
Okay. And those who refused?
They thought most other students would also refuse, about 67%.
So either way, they thought they were in the majority.
Exactly. Regardless of their own choice, they projected it onto everyone else, assuming they were part of the consensus.
It seems like a flaw now, but maybe it had an evolutionary advantage.
Possibly. Appearing confident, acting like everyone's on your side, that might have been attractive historically. Made you seem like a strong leader.
Attracted mates, resources.
Right. Doubters, people always questioning the group. Maybe less sexy, less likely to lead or pass on genes.
But in modern business, this bias can be terrible.
Oh yeah. Think about R&D teams, especially in tech. They fall in love with their complex features.
They're convinced it's amazing.
And they mistakenly assume customers will feel the same way just because they do.
Which raises that question. Why do we assume others share our views so easily? And what happens when they don't?
It blocks empathy, understanding. We just think the other person is wrong or clueless.
So what's the takeaway for you listening?
Consciously assume your worldview, your opinions, your tastes are not universal.
And critically, when you meet someone who thinks very differently,
resist that first instinct to just think they're an idiot or misinformed.
Pause. Question your own assumptions first. Why do I believe this? Why might they believe something different?
It's not just about being humble. It's essential for real critical thinking, empathy, and just working with people in a diverse world.
All right, final one for this segment. The planning fallacy.
Ah, the eternal optimist within us all.
Totally. This is our systematic habit of taking on way too much, making ridiculously ambitious plans.
And underestimating the time, cost, and risks involved.
Even when our past experience screams otherwise, we just don't seem to learn from being overly optimistic before.
Think about your daily to-do list.
Oh, don't remind me.
How often do you actually finish everything on it? Once a month? Maybe.
If that. My plans are always absurdly ambitious, even though I make a list every day. I should know better by now.
Exactly. You have years of data showing your estimates are off, but you keep making the same optimistic plans. That's the fallacy.
So how do we fight this relentless optimism?
Well, Gary Klein, the cognitive psychologist, came up with a great technique. The pre-mortem.
Instead of a post-mortem after failure.
You do it before you start. Get the team together. Imagine the project has already happened, and it failed spectacularly.
Okay, dark. But then what?
Then you brainstorm, in detail, why it failed, what went wrong.
Ah, so it forces you to think about risks you'd normally ignore.
Precisely. Things you might not bring up normally because it seems negative or impolitic. It shifts the focus from what could go right to what could realistically go wrong.
Tony Blair's forecast for the Northern Ireland peace process is a famous example of the planning fallacy, right?
Yeah, he was genuinely optimistic it would happen much faster than it did.
And Hofstadter's law captures it perfectly.
It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law.
It's that meta-awareness. Even when you try to adjust, you probably don't adjust enough.
So think about your own life. Setting deadlines for projects, renovations, even just errands.
How often do you blow past them, again and again?
Despite your best intentions and all that past experience, that's the planning fallacy biting you.
So beyond the pre-mortem, What does the source advise for better estimates?
It says detailed planning is good for peace of mind, gives you a roadmap. But for accurate estimates of cost, time, benefits, don't just trust your internal optimistic plan.
Look outside.
Yes, look at similar projects from the past. Use that historical data, those reference classes, as your main guide.
That external objective data is often way more reliable than your own hopeful forecast.
It's called taking the outside view, a powerful antidote to our built-in overconfidence.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, exploring how our brains, optimized for a different era, tend to make these systematic errors in our complex modern world. So the big question now is, what do we actually do about it? Can we really think more clearly, or are we just stuck?
That's the crucial next step. Let's start thinking about the path forward. And a key concept here is domain dependence.
This idea that knowledge doesn't transfer easily.
Exactly. We often struggle to apply expertise or insights learned in one area to another, even if they seem similar. Our knowledge gets stuck in its original domain.
Even experts fall for this.
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions doctors. They might perfectly understand base rate neglect in a medical diagnosis scenario.
Like figuring out the probability of a disease given a test result.
Right. They get that. But given the exact same probability problem framed in economic terms, they might stumble and make an irrational call.
The knowledge didn't jump domains.
It stayed stuck in the medical box.
Yeah.
Or think about the adrenaline junkie, the extreme sports person.
Flawless risk assessment when climbing a cliff or jumping off something says, I'd rather be bankrupt than dead.
But then applies almost zero caution or risk assessment to their business ventures and ends up, well, bankrupt.
Wow. Stark contrast.
We see it too with leaders who are brilliant and decisive at work.
But maybe hopeless duds, as the source puts it, managing their personal lives or families. And the irony of therapists whose own marriages might be more fragile than their clients.
They understand the theory of relationships, but applying it personally is a different domain.
The story about Barry Mazur, the decision theorist, is really telling.
Yeah. His colleague asked him to use his own decision theory for a huge personal choice moving universities.
And Mazur's reaction?
Come on, Sandy, this is serious. He basically defaulted back to gut feeling, not his own rational framework, because it was personal and high stakes.
Even the expert didn't transfer his expertise to his own life domain easily.
It really drives home that true mastery, real expertise, is incredibly specific and tied to context. Like Charlie Munger said,
If you play games where other people have their aptitudes and you don't, you're going to lose.
you gotta know where your strengths really lie.
So what does this mean for you listening?
It means you need to be really honest about your circle of competence. That's Buffett and Munger's term.
Where do you actually have deep knowledge and experience?
Be brutally honest. That circle is probably way smaller than your ego wants you to believe.
Okay.
And when you face a big, important decision that falls outside that circle,
That's when you absolutely have to switch on the hard, slow, rational thinking system 2.
but for stuff comfortably inside your circle where your intuition is well honed, you can trust your gut more. Give it freer rein.
And that distinction leads nicely into Daniel Kahneman's big idea, thinking fast and slow.
Right. His framework of 2 systems of thought.
System 1 is
Intuitive thinking. Fast, automatic, effortless, energy saving. Great for everyday stuff. Recognizing faces, reacting quickly, picking a soda. It runs in the background.
in System 2.
Rational thinking. Slow, deliberate, requires effort, burns energy, logical. This is for complex problems, abstract reasoning, big life decisions, career changes, investments, who to marry.
You have to consciously engage it.
Exactly. And connecting this to the bigger picture, our brains aren't built for constant System 2 work. That would be exhausting.
We can't be perfectly rational all the time.
And we don't need to be. The goal isn't an error-free life. That's impossible and frankly undesirable. It's about, as the source says, maneuvering ourselves through life effectively.
So the key is knowing when to use which system.
Precisely. For the big stuff, the consequential decisions where getting it wrong really hurts.
That's when you need the discipline, like the pilot's checklist idea.
Yeah, use a checklist decision tree. Force yourself to check for biases, consider alternatives, look at the data, engage System 2 deliberately.
But for the millions of small, everyday choices where the stakes are low.
Let intuition, System 1, handle it. Save your mental energy. Thinking hard is tiring.
Save that System 2 power for when it comes to the crunch.
It's about being strategic with your focus and mental effort. Know when to coast on intuition and when to hit the rational brakes and analyze carefully.
Okay, let's wrap up with a really powerful concept from the end of the book. Negative knowledge, or via negativa.
Ah, yes, the way of subtraction.
It suggests that knowing what not to do or identifying what to avoid is often much more powerful and practical than trying to figure out exactly what to do.
It's potent. The source uses that great Michelangelo analogy, carving David.
How did he do it?
He said he just removed everything that was not David.
Focused on chipping away the excess stone, not on somehow adding Davidness to it.
Exactly. And the idea is we can apply that to our thinking. Instead of chasing some elusive, perfect way to think or succeed,
Focus on eliminating the errors.
eliminate the common, predictable cognitive errors, the biases, the irrational patterns we've been discussing, and what's left. Better thinking naturally follows.
So instead of just chasing success,
Focus on removing what reliably destroys success, or happiness, or clear thought.
that feels really practical.
It is. It raises this powerful, maybe provocative question for you, the listener. In this world where we're drowning in information, constantly told, do this to succeed, add this habit, maybe the most effective path to wisdom isn't adding more. Maybe it's removing the junk.
Removing the predictable patterns of irrationality.
Exactly. It's a pragmatic, maybe counterintuitive, but potentially incredibly powerful way to think more clearly and live better.
Focus on chiseling away everything that is not David in your own life. Wow. So we've really taken a deep dive today into this fascinating landscape of cognitive errors, revealed how our amazing brains also have these built-in systematic ways of deviating from pure logic.
From perception biases like survivorship and confirmation,
To decision traps like sunk costs and misunderstanding probability.
and those social and self-traps like false consensus and motivation crowding.
But crucially, we've also touched on how to start navigating this, understanding domain dependence, using system 1 and 2 strategically.
And embracing that idea of via negativa.
Yeah. And this deep dive, it's not just academic curiosity, is it?
Not at all. It's really about empowering you, the listener, with concrete tools. Tools to be better informed, make sharper decisions.
And just navigate the world with a bit more clarity, maybe a bit more foresight.
Absolutely. So the challenge for you now, having explored all these insights, it's not trying to become perfectly rational or eliminate every single error. Like we said, that's impossible and probably exhausting.
Right.
But maybe it's about identifying your personal dirty laundry corner. Which of these traps do you tend to fall into most often?
Knowing your own patterns.
Exactly. Developing that self-awareness. And then armed with that knowledge,
Yeah.
consciously choosing when to slow down, when to engage that rational mind, when to apply these counter strategies we discussed.
So the final thought maybe is, how will you use this negative knowledge?
How will you chisel away what's not David in your own thinking, your own life,
Yeah.
rather than just endlessly chasing after new, possibly illusory Davids? It's definitely something worth pondering as you go forward.
What an incredible journey into how our minds work and sometimes how they trick us. We really hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about, to question, and hopefully to apply in your own life.